The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Jennifer helped her father pack up his belongings in their family home. At 28, she never imagined she'd be helping him prepare to move in with someone he'd known for barely 8 months. Her dad, Robert Henderson, had always been careful and methodical about every decision in his life until he met Linda. "Sweetheart, could you go through those files in my study? Just keep anything from the last 3 years," her father called from upstairs. Jennifer made her way to the familiar room where she'd spent countless hours as a child, watching her dad work or doing her homework at the small corner desk. The study still smelled of leather and old books, a comforting scent that brought back memories of simpler times before her mom passed away 4 years ago. Jennifer began sorting through the papers, creating neat piles on the mahogany desk. Tax documents, bank statements, and investment reports. Her father had always been meticulous about keeping records. As she worked, a hefty manila envelope slipped from between 2 folders, spilling its contents across the floor. Jennifer knelt to gather the scattered papers, but something caught her eye. A bank statement from just 2 months ago showed a transfer of $50,000 to an account she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew her father's finances well. He'd always been open about money matters with her, teaching her the importance of financial responsibility since she was young. This transfer seemed out of character. Further digging revealed more transfers: $75,000 last month, $100,000 3 weeks ago. All to different accounts, all after Linda came into their lives. Jennifer's hands trembled as she held the papers. The total amount transferred was close to $500,000. She remembered Linda's elaborate stories about her successful interior design business in California, her charitable work with underprivileged children, and her plans to open an art gallery. Everything about Linda had seemed perfect, almost too perfect. Jennifer thought back to the day her father introduced Linda to the family. The woman had swept in like a fresh breeze, all designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She charmed everyone with tales of her travels and humanitarian work, but something had felt off. "Found anything interesting?" Linda's voice made Jennifer jump. She stood in the doorway, wearing an expensive-looking cream blouse and pearled earrings, gifts from Jennifer's father. "Just some old bank statements," Jennifer replied, carefully sliding the revealing documents under a pile of tax returns. "Dad wants to keep everything from the last 3 years." Linda's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained fixed. "Robert's always been so organized. It's one of the things I love about him." She lingered for a moment longer than necessary before clicking away in her designer heels. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. The numbers kept floating through her mind. She pulled out her laptop and began searching Linda's background. The woman had mentioned running successful businesses in California, but initial searches turned up nothing under her name. Jennifer's hands flew across the keyboard as she dug deeper. She found it strange that Linda had no social media presence before 2 years ago. For someone supposedly so involved in charity work and high-end interior design, she was surprisingly invisible online. The next morning, over coffee with her father, Jennifer tried to approach the subject carefully. "Dad, tell me again how you and Linda met." Robert's face lit up. "At the charity gala for the Children's Hospital, remember? She was there representing her foundation." "Which foundation was that again?" Her children's foundation." He frowned slightly. "She's mentioned it several times." Jennifer noticed how her father's certainty wavered. It was subtle, but it was there. "And her interior design business in California." "She sold it before moving here," he said quickly, too quickly. "Sweetheart, why all these questions?" "Just curious," Jennifer said lightly, but her mind was racing. Every answer her father gave seemed vague, as if he was reciting something he'd been told, rather than sharing facts he knew for certain. Over the next few days, Jennifer watched Linda more closely. She noticed how the woman always redirected conversations about her past, how she never received calls from old friends or business associates, how she tensed up whenever financial documents were mentioned. One afternoon, while her father was at a doctor's appointment, Jennifer overheard Linda on the phone in the garden. Gone was the refined, elegant tone she usually used, replaced by sharp, harsh words spoken in a completely different accent. "Listen, everything's on track," Linda hissed into the phone. The wedding's in 3 weeks. Once it's done, we'll have access to everything. No, the daughter's not a problem. She'll be dealt with. Jennifer's blood ran cold. She backed away from the window, her mind whirling. The woman her father planned to marry wasn't just hiding something, she was actively planning to steal his wealth. That evening, Jennifer sat in her apartment, surrounded by printouts and notes. The transfers, the inconsistencies in Linda's stories, the phone call, it all pointed to something sinister. But she needed more proof before approaching her father. He was so in love, so convinced he'd found happiness again after losing her mom. She opened her laptop and started reaching out to private investigators and financial fraud experts. If Linda was running a scam, she must have done this before. Someone somewhere would have records of her previous activities. As Jennifer worked late into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was in a race against time. The wedding was just 3 weeks away, and her father's entire life savings, not to mention his happiness, hung in the balance. What she didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. The evidence she would uncover would shake their family to its core and lead to one of the most dramatic wedding day confrontations anyone in their small town had ever witnessed. Looking at the calendar on her wall, Jennifer made a silent promise to her father and to her mother's memory. She would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Little did she know that her discovery in the study that day would set in motion a chain of events that would not only save her father, but also expose a criminal enterprise that had been preying on vulnerable widowers for years. This was just day one of what would become the most challenging 3 weeks of Jennifer's life, but she was ready for the fight. Her father's happiness and his future depended on it. The next morning, Jennifer woke up early and called in sick to work. She knew she needed to focus all her energy on investigating Linda. Her first stop was the local courthouse, where she spent hours combing through public records. While Linda's current name didn't show up in many places, Jennifer noticed something odd. The few photographs she found from Linda's supposed charity events showed striking similarities to photos of other women from different states. The breakthrough came when Jennifer contacted a private investigator who specialized in romance scams. "Send me what you have," he said after hearing her story. Within hours, he called back, his voice urgent. "You need to hear this. The woman you're looking into, she's gone by at least 5 different names in the past decade." Jennifer's hands shook as she wrote down the aliases: Patricia Morrison, Elizabeth Grant, Susan Cooper, and others. Each identity had the same pattern: a wealthy widower, a whirlwind romance, and a devastating financial aftermath. At home that evening, Jennifer created a timeline on her bedroom wall, careful to keep it hidden from her father's frequent visits. Red string-connected newspaper clippings, printouts, and handwritten notes. The pattern was clear: Linda, or whatever her real name was, had perfected her scheme over years. "Just checking in on my favorite future stepdaughter," Linda's voice chirped through the phone the next day. "Your father mentioned you weren't feeling well." "Just a bug," Jennifer replied, trying to keep her voice steady while staring at the wall of evidence before her. "I should be better soon." "Oh, good. We wouldn't want you to miss any of the wedding preparations." There was something in Linda's tone, a subtle threat beneath the sweetness. After hanging up, Jennifer dove deeper into her investigation. She discovered that Linda's previous victims had all been successful businessmen, just like her father. Each time, she'd approached them at charity events or upscale social gatherings. She always had the perfect backstory: wealthy, philanthropic, with a successful business background that couldn't quite be verified. Jennifer reached out to one of Linda's previous victims, a man named Richard from Florida. At first, he refused to talk, but when Jennifer explained her situation, his resistance crumbled. "She destroyed me," he admitted, his voice heavy with pain. "Not just financially, she took my dignity, my trust in people. By the time I realized what was happening, she transferred most of my assets to offshore accounts. The police couldn't trace them." The next week was a blur of research and careful observation. Jennifer noticed how Linda always kept her phone close, never letting anyone touch it. She used multiple devices and seemed to have different personalities for each one. On her business phone, she was sharp and aggressive. With her personal phone, she played the role of the doting fiancé. One rainy afternoon, Jennifer followed Linda to a coffee shop across town. Sitting a few tables away, Hidden behind a newspaper, she watched as Linda met with a man in an expensive suit. Their conversation was hushed, but Jennifer managed to record snippets of it on her phone. "The Henderson account is bigger than we thought," Linda whispered. "Once we're married, we can start moving the larger assets." "Just don't rush it like last time," the man warned. "That mess in Phoenix almost exposed everything." Jennifer's heart raced. Phoenix, that was where one of Linda's previous victims had lived. She'd fled the city suddenly, leaving behind a trail of suspicious bank transactions. Back at home, Jennifer's father noticed her distraction. "Honey, is everything okay? You seem worried lately." "Just wedding stress," she lied, hating herself for not telling him the truth, but she knew she needed solid proof before breaking his heart. The investigation led Jennifer to a former employee of Linda's fake interior design business in California. The woman, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that the business had been a front for money laundering. "She hired us as fake employees," she explained. "We'd show up at events, pretend to be her staff. The whole thing was elaborately staged." Jennifer's breakthrough came when she discovered Linda's real identity through a facial recognition search. Her real name was Catherine Wells, and she had a record of fraud charges in multiple states. The FBI had been building a case against her organization for years, but she'd always managed to stay one step ahead. Late one night, as Jennifer compiled her evidence, she heard voices downstairs. Creeping to the top of the stairs, she overheard Linda on the phone again. "Everything's ready for after the wedding," Linda said. "Once we have control of his accounts, we'll move fast. The daughter? Don't worry about her. She'll be too busy dealing with her own problems to interfere." Jennifer's blood ran cold. Was that a threat? She doubled her efforts, working through the night to organize her findings. The wedding was just days away, and she needed to make sure her evidence was irrefutable. She contacted the FBI agent handling Catherine Wells' case, sending him the new evidence she'd gathered. "This is exactly what we've been waiting for," he said, "but we need to handle this carefully. If she suspects anything, she'll disappear again." Jennifer spent the next few days watching her father and Linda together, her heart breaking at how happy he seemed. He was planning their honeymoon, talking about their future together, completely unaware of the devastation that awaited him. Linda, meanwhile, grew more controlling. She insisted on being involved in every aspect of the wedding planning, particularly anything involving finances. She'd already convinced Jennifer's father to add her name to several of his accounts for convenience. The pressure was building. Jennifer knew she had to act soon, but she also knew she needed to be smart about it. One wrong move and Linda would vanish, taking her father's money and his heart with her. As she sat in her room, reviewing her evidence one final time, Jennifer thought about her mother. "I won't let her hurt him, Mom," she whispered to the photograph on her nightstand. "I promise." The next few days would require perfect timing, careful planning, and more courage than Jennifer knew she possessed. But as she looked at the wall of evidence before her, the proof of Linda's crimes, the stories of her previous victims, the details of her real identity, she knew she was ready. The wedding was approaching fast, and Jennifer had to make a choice: confront Linda directly or wait for the perfect moment to expose her in front of everyone. Either way, she knew the next few days would change everything. Her father's future, his happiness, and his financial security all hung in the balance. What Jennifer didn't know was that Linda had plans of her own, plans that would make the upcoming confrontation even more dangerous than she could imagine. With just days until the wedding, the Henderson house transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Florists, caterers, and decorators streamed in and out, while Linda orchestrated everything with seemingly perfect precision. But Jennifer noticed how her future stepmother's eyes constantly darted to her phone, checking messages from unknown contacts. "Your father's given me full control of the wedding budget," Linda announced during breakfast, her red-painted nails drumming against her coffee cup. "He trusts my taste implicitly." She smiled at Robert, who beamed back adoringly. Jennifer watched as her father signed check after check without question. The wedding costs had somehow ballooned to nearly 6 figures, an amount that made Jennifer's stomach churn, knowing where that money would likely end up. "Dad, don't you think this is getting a bit excessive?" Jennifer ventured carefully one afternoon, watching him write another large check. "Nothing's too much for Linda, sweetheart. She deserves the perfect day." He paused, lowering his voice. Besides, I've never seen the investment returns I'm getting since she introduced me to her financial advisor friend. Jennifer's heart sank. She'd discovered that Linda's financial advisor was actually part of her fraud ring, likely setting up elaborate Ponzi schemes to create the illusion of massive returns. The wedding preparations continued at a dizzying pace. Linda had convinced Robert to change the venue 3 times, each switch requiring new deposits that Jennifer suspected would never be refunded. She'd also insisted on hiring her own wedding planner, a stern-faced woman named Gloria who Jennifer had spotted meeting with Linda's mysterious business associate at the coffee shop. One evening, while Linda was occupied with the florist, Jennifer overheard Gloria on the phone in the garden. "Everything's set for the asset transfer after the ceremony. Yes, the offshore accounts are ready. No, the old man suspects nothing." Jennifer quietly recorded the conversation on her phone, adding it to her growing collection of evidence. But what truly alarmed her was watching her father become increasingly isolated from his friends and family. Linda had convinced him to remove his longtime business partner from the guest list, claiming he'd made an inappropriate comment about her. She'd suggested that his golf buddies were jealous of their happiness, leading Robert to decline their weekly games. Even Jennifer's Aunt Carol, Robert's sister, had been relegated to a back table at the reception after questioning Linda's mysterious background. "I just want what's best for you, darling," Linda would say, massaging Robert's shoulders as he sat in his study. "Some people just don't understand our love." Jennifer noticed her father's transformation with growing concern. The once confident businessman now seemed to defer to Linda on every decision. He'd even started taking new medication that Linda insisted would help with his stress, medication that seemed to make him more confused and agreeable. 3 days before the wedding, Jennifer discovered something that made her blood run cold. While Linda was at a charity meeting, Jennifer managed to access her laptop, which had been left open. There, in a hidden folder, she found detailed plans for what would happen after the ceremony. Bank account numbers, transfer schedules, and a complete timeline for emptying her father's accounts were laid out in meticulous detail. The documents revealed that Linda and her associates planned to transfer everything within hours of the ceremony, leaving her father penniless before the honeymoon even began. What worried Jennifer most was a file labeled Contingency Plans. It contained personal information about her, her daily routine, her workplace, even photos of her coming and going from her apartment. Linda wasn't just planning to rob her father, she was prepared to deal with any interference from Jennifer. That same evening, during the rehearsal dinner, Jennifer watched Linda work the room like a professional actress. She charmed the priest with stories of her charitable work, impressed the bridesmaids with promises of expensive gifts, and kept Robert glued to her side, hanging on her every word. "I'd like to propose a toast," Linda announced, raising her champagne glass. "To my wonderful future husband, who has shown me what true love really means." Her eyes glistened with tears that Jennifer knew were as fake as everything else about her. The guests sighed appreciatively, but Jennifer noticed something else. During Linda's emotional speech, Gloria, the wedding planner, was quietly taking photos of the gift table where guests had placed cards, many containing checks for the happy couple. Later that night, Jennifer sat in her childhood bedroom, reviewing her evidence one final time. The FBI had confirmed they would have agents in place at the wedding, but they needed her to wait for the perfect moment to act. One wrong move and Linda would disappear, taking her father's fortune with her. She could hear her father and Linda talking in the garden below her window. Linda's laugh floated up, that perfect, practiced laugh that had fooled so many before. "I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you," Linda was saying, her voice syrupy sweet. "I'm the luckiest man alive," Robert replied, and Jennifer felt tears stinging her eyes. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Jennifer watched as Linda made last-minute changes to the seating arrangement, strategically placing any potentially suspicious guests far from the main action. She insisted on handling all the wedding gift cards personally to keep them safe. The night before the wedding, Jennifer could barely sleep. She kept thinking about her mother, wondering what she would do in this situation. The photo of her mom on the nightstand seemed to give her strength. "I won't let her hurt him," Jennifer whispered again to the photograph. "I promise." What Jennifer didn't know was that Linda had her own suspicions. The frequent questions, the careful observations, none of it had gone unnoticed. As Jennifer finally drifted off to sleep, Linda was in the guest room, making a very different kind of wedding preparation, one that would turn the next day into something no one expected. The stage was set for a wedding day that would be remembered for years to come, but not for the reasons anyone might have thought. As the sun rose on what should have been her father's happiest day, Jennifer knew she was ready for whatever might come. The question was, would her father be ready for the truth? The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Jennifer had been awake since dawn, her heart pounding as she reviewed her plan one final time. The church bells chimed in the distance as she got dressed, carefully hiding a small USB drive in her bouquet, a drive containing all the evidence she'd gathered. At the church, everything seemed picture-perfect on the surface. Flowers adorned every pew, soft music played, and guests began arriving in their finest attire. But Jennifer noticed the subtle signs of Linda's true nature breaking through her carefully crafted facade. "Where's my special phone?" Linda snapped at Gloria, her usual smooth tone replaced by something harder. "I need it before the ceremony." Jennifer watched as the wedding planner scurried to fetch a small silver phone, different from the one Linda usually carried. In the bridal suite, Linda was a vision in white, but her eyes were cold as she surveyed the room. "Everyone out," she commanded the bridesmaids. "I need a moment alone." As the women filed out, she grabbed Jennifer's arm. "Not you. We need to talk." The door clicked shut, leaving them alone. Linda's perfectly made-up face transformed into something harder, more calculating. "You've been quite busy lately, haven't you?" she said, her voice low and threatening. "Asking questions, following me, poking around in things that don't concern you." Jennifer's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me," Linda hissed, her fingers tightening on Jennifer's arm. "I've dealt with nosy children like you before. Your father is mine now. The smart thing would be to accept that and stay quiet." "Or what?" Jennifer challenged, pulling free from Linda's grip. Linda's laugh was cold. "All things might get very difficult for you. It would be a shame if something happened to your job, or your apartment, or maybe that little cafe you love to visit every morning at 8:15. The threat was clear. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine as she realized Linda had been watching her too. But before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Linda, honey, the photographer wants some pre-ceremony shots." Robert's voice came through the door. In an instant, Linda's expression changed back to one of radiant happiness. "Coming, darling?" she called out sweetly. She turned to Jennifer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Remember what I said. Don't ruin this for your father." The next hour passed in a blur of photographs and last-minute preparations. Jennifer watched her father beaming with pride, completely unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place. She noticed Linda checking her special phone repeatedly, exchanging quick texts with unknown contacts. As the guests took their seats, Jennifer spotted two men in suits sitting quietly at the back of the church, the FBI agents she'd been coordinating with. They gave her a subtle nod. Everything was in place. The wedding music began to play. Jennifer took her place as bridesmaid, her heart pounding so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. Her father stood at the altar, looking happier than she'd seen him since her mother's passing. That sight almost made her waver, almost. Linda appeared at the church doors, a vision in white silk and lace. The guests stood, admiring the beautiful bride. But Jennifer saw past the facade. She noticed Linda's quick glance toward the side exit, the way her hand clutched her bouquet a little too tightly. The ceremony began. The priest spoke about love and trust, words that felt like daggers in Jennifer's heart given what she knew. When he reached the crucial moment, if anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, Jennifer felt every muscle in her body tense. Linda's eyes locked onto her, a silent warning. The guests waited in awkward silence. Jennifer's father looked around, confused by the extended pause. Taking a deep breath, Jennifer stepped forward. "I have something to say." The church erupted in whispers. Linda's face contorted for a split second before she recovered her composure. "Jennifer, dear, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes blazing. "I'm sorry, Dad," Jennifer said, her voice shaking slightly. "But there's something you need to know about your bride." She pulled out her phone and the USB drive. Linda lunged forward, trying to grab them, but Jennifer was faster. The movement caused Linda to stumble, her carefully controlled mask slipping completely. "She's not who she says she is," Jennifer announced, her voice growing stronger. "Her real name is Catherine Wells, and she's wanted in 3 states for fraud." The church erupted in chaos. Linda's face transformed from gentle bride to cornered predator in an instant. She reached for her special phone, but one of the FBI agents was already moving forward. "Don't even think about it," he said firmly. Robert stood frozen at the altar, looking between his daughter and his bride. "Linda, what's going on?" "They're lying," Linda snarled, all pretense gone. "Robert, darling, they're just jealous of our happiness. Remember what I told you about your daughter? How she's been trying to come between us." But Jennifer was already connecting her phone to the church's projection system, a feature usually used for hen lyrics. Documents, photos, and recordings began to play, revealing the truth about Linda's past crimes. "The transfers you've been making, Dad, they were going to offshore accounts. She's done this before, multiple times. These are her victims," Jennifer explained, showing photographs of other devastated men Linda had conned. Linda's eyes darted around the church, looking for an escape route. But the FBI agents had positioned themselves strategically. She was trapped. Robert's face had gone pale as he watched the evidence unfold. Years of financial records, fake identities, and recorded conversations played out before the stunned congregation. When Linda's true voice came through the speakers, harsh and calculating, discussing plans to steal everything he owned, he stumbled backward. "I trusted you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I loved you." Linda's response was a cold laugh. "Love? Please. You were just another mark." A lonely old man so desperate for affection he never questioned anything. Those cruel words seemed to break something in Robert. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone and dialed 911. "I need to report a fraud," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "And I want to press charges." The FBI agents moved in, reading Linda her rights as they handcuffed her. Her perfect wedding dress, now wrinkled and askew, seemed like a fitting symbol of her ruined facade. As Linda was led away, she turned back one last time. "You'll regret this," she spat at Jennifer. But Jennifer stood tall, supported by her father's arm around her shoulders. The guests sat in shocked silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The perfect wedding had transformed into something none of them would ever forget, but for very different reasons than they'd expected. As evening fell, the last of the guests finally departed. The church, which hours ago had been prepared for a celebration of love, now stood as a crime scene. Yellow police tape marked off areas where evidence had been collected. Robert and Jennifer sat in the front pew, emotionally exhausted but together. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't figured it out," Robert said, breaking the silence. "I would have lost everything." "Not everything," Jennifer corrected him. "You wouldn't have lost me. I would have never stopped fighting for you, Dad." A police officer approached them with news that Linda was being processed at the station. They have found evidence linking her to similar crimes in multiple states. Her arrest would bring closure to many families who had been victimized over the years. "We've also detained her associates," the officer added. "The man posing as her financial advisor, the fake wedding planner, and several others. This is a major breakthrough in our investigation of romance scams targeting older adults." As they finally prepared to leave the church, Robert paused at the door, looking back at the altar. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said softly to Jennifer. "You showed the same strength and determination she always had." Jennifer felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I learned from both of you, Dad. You taught me to trust my instincts and to fight for what's right." They stepped out into the cool evening air, leaving behind the remnants of what should have been a wedding day. But instead of marking the beginning of a devastating con, it had become the day a daughter's love and determination saved her father from a fate that had claimed so many others. What they didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. The evidence Jennifer had gathered would lead to even more shocking discoveries about Linda's criminal enterprise. But for now, father and daughter walked to their car together, stronger for having faced this crisis as a family. The setting sun cast long shadows across the church steps, symbolically closing this chapter of their lives. There would be hard days ahead as they dealt with the aftermath, but they would face them together. The police station buzzed with activity as Linda sat in the interrogation room, her wedding dress now wrinkled and stained, her perfect makeup streaked with angry tears. Outside, Jennifer and her father watched through the one-way glass as FBI agents presented their evidence. "We need to talk about your safety," Agent Thompson said, turning to them. "People like Linda often have connections we don't initially uncover. We'll be placing you both under temporary protection until we're sure all members of her network have been apprehended." Robert nodded numbly, still processing the day's events. "What about our house? Our accounts?" "Your home is being searched for surveillance equipment," the agent explained. "We've already found several hidden cameras and recording devices. She was monitoring your conversations for months." Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine, remembering all the private moments they'd shared in what they thought was the safety of their home. The violation of their privacy felt almost as devastating as the financial deception. Inside the interrogation room, Linda's facade had completely crumbled. Gone was the elegant, sophisticated woman who had charmed their entire social circle. In her place sat a hardened criminal, coldly detailing her crimes in exchange for consideration from the prosecutors. "The wedding was just the final step," they heard her say through the speaker. "We had everything in place, the offshore accounts, the false identities, even the honeymoon booking that would have left him stranded in a foreign country while we empty his accounts." Robert turned away from the window, unable to listen anymore. "I gave her access to everything," he whispered. "My business, my savings, even my retirement accounts." Jennifer placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "The FBI says they can recover a lot of it, Dad." She didn't have time to complete the transfers. As the evening progressed, more members of Linda's criminal organization were brought in. The fake wedding planner, Gloria, broke down quickly under questioning, revealing a complex network of similar operations across the country. The man who had posed as Linda's financial advisor was caught trying to board a flight to a non-extradition country. "This is bigger than we initially thought," Agent Thompson told them, reviewing the growing evidence. "Your case has helped us uncover one of the largest romance scam operations we've seen. They've been targeting wealthy widowers and divorcees for years." The true scope of Linda's crimes began to emerge. Photos of other victims were spread across the detective's desk, successful businessmen, doctors, lawyers, all carefully chosen for their wealth and vulnerability. Each man had a similar story: a chance meeting, a whirlwind romance, and a devastating financial loss. "You're actually the first ones who stopped her before the wedding," the agent noted. "Most victims don't realize what's happened until it's too late." Jennifer's phone buzzed constantly with messages from wedding guests, local news reporters, and even other victims' families who had heard about Linda's arrest. The story was spreading quickly through their community and beyond. Around midnight, exhausted from hours of questioning and statements, Jennifer and Robert were escorted to a secure hotel. The FBI had arranged for protection until they could be sure no other members of Linda's organization would try to retaliate. In their adjoining rooms, neither could sleep. Jennifer found her father sitting in the hotel's armchair, staring out at the city lights. "I keep thinking about the signs I missed," he said softly. The way she always deflected questions about her past. How she never got calls from family or old friends. Even her accent slipped sometimes, but I convinced myself I was imagining things. Jennifer sat on the arm of his chair. "She was trained to exploit people's loneliness, Dad." The FBI said she spent months studying her targets, learning exactly how to manipulate them. "Your mother would have seen through her immediately," Robert said with a sad smile. "She always could read people so well." "That's probably where I got it from," Jennifer replied, managing a small laugh. "That and your stubbornness." "I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the truth." As they talked through the night, more details emerged from the ongoing investigation. The FBI had discovered Linda's real identity. She had been born in a small town in Michigan, had a history of petty crimes that escalated to sophisticated fraud schemes, and had been involved in similar operations for over a decade. The next morning, Agent Thompson arrived with news. "We've frozen over 20 accounts linked to their operation," he reported. "The total amount of money involved, it's in the millions, and we're still finding more victims." Robert straightened in his chair, a familiar determination returning to his eyes. "I want to help," he said firmly. "If my story can prevent others from falling into her trap, I want to share it." Jennifer watched proudly as her father transformed from a victim to an advocate. His business experience and analytical mind were already helping the FBI understand how Linda's organization had manipulated financial systems and evaded detection for so long. Throughout the day, more pieces of Linda's elaborate scheme came to light. The charity galas where she met her victims were all fake events, staged with paid actors. The elegant offices she claimed to own were rented by the hour for show. Even her designer clothes and jewelry were convincing counterfeits. "She had an answer for everything," Robert recalled, shaking his head. "When I asked about her family, she had this heartbreaking story about being an orphan. When I questioned her business success, she had fake articles and awards to show me." The FBI agents documented everything, building what they said would be one of their strongest cases against a romance scam organization. Linda's detailed records of her crimes, kept on her special phone and laptop, provided a roadmap to her entire operation. As evening approached again, Jennifer and Robert were finally cleared to return home, though under police protection. Their house had been swept for additional surveillance devices and declared safe. Standing in their living room, surrounded by the remnants of wedding preparations that now seemed like props in a cruel play, Robert turned to his daughter. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved me from more than just financial ruin. You saved me from losing myself." Jennifer hugged him tightly, feeling the strength returning to her father's embrace. They had survived Linda's elaborate con together, and somehow their bond was stronger for it. What they didn't know then was that their story would become a landmark case in the fight against romance scams, helping countless others avoid similar fates. But that night, in their home, father and daughter simply held each other, grateful for the love and trust that had helped them uncover the truth before it was too late. 3 months after the dramatic wedding day, Jennifer sat in the courthouse, watching as Linda and her associates faced justice. The trial had drawn national attention, bringing to light the growing epidemic of romance scams targeting vulnerable adults. Robert took the stand that morning, his voice steady as he shared his story. "I'm not here just for myself," he began. "I'm here for all the other victims who lost not just their money, but their trust in human connection." The evidence Jennifer had gathered proved crucial to the case. The prosecution presented hundreds of documents, recordings, and photographs detailing Linda's decade-long crime spree. Each piece of evidence revealed another layer of deception, another shattered life. The defendant didn't just steal money, the prosecutor explained to the jury. She stole years of people's lives, their ability to trust, their hope for love after loss. These crimes go far beyond simple fraud. During breaks in the trial, other victims approached Robert and Jennifer, sharing their own stories. A retired doctor who lost his life savings. A widowed business owner who had to sell his company. Each story strengthened their resolve to see justice done. "Your daughter's investigation broke the case wide open," Agent Thompson told Robert during a recess. "We've already used her evidence to prevent 3 similar scams in other states." The trial lasted 2 weeks, with Linda maintaining her cold demeanor throughout. But when the jury returned with their verdict, even she couldn't hide her reaction to the unanimous guilty on all counts. Catherine Wells, also known as Linda Morrison, the judge announced, using her real name, "You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Additionally, you and your co-conspirators are ordered to pay restitution to all identified victims." As Linda was led away in handcuffs, Jennifer noticed her father straighten in his seat, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The woman who had nearly destroyed their lives would never harm another family. But the end of the trial wasn't the end of their story. Robert, inspired by their experience, decided to channel his pain into purpose. With Jennifer's help, he established a foundation dedicated to educating people about romance scams and supporting victims. "We need to remove the shame," Robert explained during their first foundation meeting. "These criminals are sophisticated professionals. Being targeted doesn't make you stupid or gullible, it makes you human." The foundation quickly grew, partnering with law enforcement agencies and financial institutions to create early warning systems for potential scams. Jennifer's detailed documentation of Linda's methods became a training tool for bank employees and social workers. "The key is understanding their tactics," Jennifer explained during a workshop. They don't just go after money, they manipulate emotions, isolate their victims, and create a false reality that's hard to break free from. Their work attracted media attention, leading to appearances on national news programs and speaking engagements across the country. Robert found that sharing his story helped him heal, while helping others avoid similar traps. Every time someone recognizes the warning signs and steps back from a potential scam, that's a victory, he told a group of seniors at a community center. That's another family saved from what we went through. The foundation also created support groups for scam survivors, providing a safe space for victims to share their experiences and rebuild their confidence. Jennifer watched proudly as her father became a mentor to others, turning his pain into wisdom that helped heal wounded hearts. 1 year after the failed wedding, Robert and Jennifer stood together at a national conference on elder fraud, preparing to share their story once again. But this time, they weren't just telling a tale of deception and loss. They were celebrating the thousands of people they'd helped through their foundation. Looking back, Robert said to the packed auditorium, "I realized that Linda didn't just fail to destroy us, she accidentally helped us create something beautiful. Our foundation has reached more people than she ever scammed, and we've turned her playbook against her kind." Jennifer beamed with pride as she watched her father speak. The broken man from the wedding day was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more determined to make a difference. Their family bond, tested by Linda's deception, had emerged stronger than ever. Weekly dinners became a sacred tradition, with honest conversations replacing polite small talk. They'd learned to laugh again, even finding humor in some of Linda's more outrageous lies. Remember when she claimed to have trained as a ballet dancer in Russia? Jennifer would joke, making her father chuckle and shake his head. The foundation's success brought unexpected healing to their community too. Former wedding guests became volunteers, helping spread awareness about romance scams. Robert's old friends, whom Linda had tried to drive away, rallied around their cause. On quiet evenings, Robert and Jennifer would sometimes sit in their garden, talking about how far they'd come. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely,